Sorry everybody, it's Xilicks here, and welcome to Season 5 of the Elysian League. Every week I will be hosting the power rankings over here on my channel, and I will also be uploading my week battles as they happen. So basically what the power rankings is going to be is every week I'm going to be looking at all the teams and ranking them from least to greatest. Now this is going to be an overarching season thing, so basically at the end of the season we'll have, in my opinion, the top team at the top and the bottom team at the bottom. The rankings will be changing every week based on how well people play, and yeah. So at week 0, we're going to be talking about the drafts. None of the coaches have had their games yet at the time of recording this, and I'm going to be nitpicking every single draft and ranking them from least to favorite. Keep in mind, this is primarily opinionated, as we have not had any battles yet. This is what I feel are the best teams, not necessarily which ones are the best teams, and I'll be giving my opinions as to why I feel that way. One thing I want to mention before we get into this: if you feel that you were ranked too low, or somebody else is ranked too low or too high, keep in mind, none of the battles have happened yet. This is just solely going off what I think looks good on paper. I'm not taking the coaches into account, and if your opinion differs from mine, then it differs from mine. Week 0 is going to be the most opinionated week. The rest of the weeks will be ranking only based on the battles and way less of my opinion. So yeah, I'm going to try not to be biased as I go through it, but there will be some teams that are ranked fairly low just because I feel that they won't work that well, and I'm sure that the coach can prove me wrong and their team will be totally fine. One more thing I want to say before we get into it: if the name of your team has changed or you want a logo added, make sure you message me. Not all of the teams have logos, and some of the team names may have changed, or some of the teams may want a different logo. Let me know and I will change it for you for the next week. So without any further ado, let's get into the number 16 spot. Coming in at number 16, we have Demonic and the Tampa Bay Rayquaza. So 3 things really hold back this draft. Number 1, fighting types. Fighting types absolutely obliterate this team. The only real resists I see is Cofagrigus, Volcarona, and Gallade, quote unquote. But yeah, like a fighting type with the right coverage moves is absolutely running through this team. Another huge problem are ground types. The only ground resist, which is also an immunity, is Hydreigon. And that's not something you want because most teams have drafted a strong ground type or a strong fighting type, and your team absolutely gets run through by them. The third point that I have to make is you have Volcarona as your Z-Mon and as your primary special attacking Mon outside of Hydreigon, but this is like your setup sweeper on the special side, which is a Mon that's quad weak to rocks, and your only hazard removal is Kartana. This is poor drafting. People are going to set up rocks almost every single week because you have a Volcarona, and your only way of getting rid of them is Kartana. This needs to change. You need to make some trades. You need some more bulk on your team. Your Firewater Grass Core is not defensive at all. It gets run through, and you don't have any real walls outside of Cofagrigus and Gastrodon. I feel you need to drop some things like the Manectric, like the Ditto, get yourself some bulk, get yourself some hazard removal, and get yourself some better defensive typing, and I think that this team can be alright. In the number 15 spot, we have the Toronto Mucks, coached by Riolu. This is a rain team. You see Politoed, you see Manaphy, you see Ludicolo, Corsola, Blastoise, whatever. This team has some problems. So problem number 1 is your Z-Mon is Blastoise. I would have liked to see the Z-Manaphy instead of Blastoise. Z-Manaphy, in my opinion, is way better than whatever Z-Blastoise can do, and I think that was a poor decision. I can understand maybe you have some wicked strategy with the Blastoise, but again, Z Manaphy is just better in my opinion, and it's objectively better on a rain team because you can set up the Z Rain Dance. You also get the hydration ability and all that fun stuff. Looking at some of your other mons, your defensive synergy between Crobat and Chansey is okay, but your entire team does not have a Psychic Resist, and you have at least 3 weaknesses. You don't have any abusers of Thunder or Hurricane. This is a rain team. Okay, those mons get boosted accuracy in the rain. You really could have utilized that. I do not think that Kabutops was drafted. If it was, then I guess I'll see it later. But off the top of my head, I don't think Kabutops was drafted, and I think that would have helped this team a bit. You could have also gotten a Steel type, which takes advantage of the rain by weakening its fire weakness. As far as plus sides go, Manaphy is a really good mon. Mega Beedrill can put in work, but it's going to get worn down. And I think Crobat's going to help you out a lot. But your lower tier picks are just, in my opinion, they don't help the team. Ice and electric coverage just run through your entire team. Like, you really need a Steel type or just an ice resist in general that isn't weak to electric. I mean, it has some glaring issues, and I think maybe a few trades or ad drops, and you can see yourself in a better position for future weeks. In the number 14 spot, this was a pretty difficult decision to put the Green Bay Sandslashers, coached by Swagzire, all the way down here, just because the team is alright. It's not a bad team by any means. That being said, all of the other teams, in my opinion, are ranked higher than this. So, if that goes to show anything, people drafted pretty well this season. And another thing I want to say is, as far as this placement goes at number 14, I feel that this also could be interchangeable with the next 3. So it could be in the 13th, the 12th, or the 11th spot. I just happen to put it here because, again, going off of only the draft is pretty difficult, so I have this here. Looking at the team, it looks like a Webs team, right? You have Garchomp, you have Entei, you have Beware, which can abuse Webs. Yeah, but I feel that you're not going to get the Webs up many games just because you don't have any ways of blocking Rapid Spin. To my knowledge, you don't have any Defiant users. I don't know if any of these things get Defiant as like a hidden ability or whatever, but I feel like you're going to set up the Webs and it's going to get spun away or defogged almost every single game. I like your Zmon as Garchomp. Garchomp, in my opinion, is a very good Zmon. However, on the flip side, I do not like your Mega. Your Mega gets worn down by Toxic, and your only 2 Toxic switch-ins, being Alolan Sandslash and Vileplume, they're pretty slow and they're not crazy bulky. So if people predict, oh, hey, I have something that's probably going to Toxic this Slowbro and he's going to switch into one of his Toxic immunities, well, then they're probably going to take a big hit. So, or they're just going to click U-turn and it's no fun, right? This team kind of gets wrecked by like really, really good momentum if you don't get the Webs up just because of how slow it is. That being said, you do have Raikou, which does mend that a little bit with its good speed and the ability to Volt Switch. However, obviously you can't Volt Switch on a ground type, and you don't have any super fast U-turn users, unless for some reason Persian gets it. I don't know to my knowledge. But yeah, so I think you can make this team work. If I were to suggest anything, I would say potentially a Ghost type would help, or a Defiant user. And yeah, maybe something that doesn't get wrecked by Choice Scarfed mons that easily, or potentially a strong Choice Scarfer for your own team, just because I don't really consider Garchomp a great Choice Scarfer if you have it as a Zmon, because while you do have the ability to run a Choice Scarf on it, most weeks you're probably going to want a Z Crystal to OHKO a certain mon. So yeah, I think you can make it work, although I don't think that this draft is anywhere near perfect, and it does have some issues. Over in the number 13 slot, we have the coach of the Los Angeles Galvantulas, Jax. Now, the reason why I have this team ranked so low is because I personally don't like the majority of the Mons that were drafted. I think that Snorlax, Thunder's Eye, Greninja, Celebi, Zygarde add pretty well to the team, but the rest of the picks I don't really like. I don't think they support the overall theme of what the team is, which is kind of a bulkier balance offense. The problem is you don't have any huge walls because you have Skarmory Snorlax, right? And Snorlax is primarily a special wall, whereas Skarmory is primarily a physical wall, but that's all you have. And if people run coverage for both of those Mons, the rest of your team isn't going to be wanting to take those hits afterwards. I am aware that you can run a bulkier Celebi or a bulkier Zygarde, but both of those Mons are weak to Ice, and while Snorlax can take Ice attacks very well, again, if people prepare for that, the coverage against your team doesn't have to be too diverse to be able to hit all of your Mons. So a offensive Mon with a lot of coverage options can really run through your team. I think your speed is also kind of wonky. You have some fast Mons like the Greninja and Hitmonlee and the Thundurus, but then the rest of your team is pretty slow. The only Mons that are kind of in the middle is like Zygarde if it gets some boosts, and Celebi. Speaking of Celebi, I do like it as a Z-Mon. It gets some interesting coverage options, although it's not one of the best, and it might be a little bit predictable as to what Z moves that it runs because it doesn't have a very wide variety of coverage, whereas Greninja, another Mon that you did draft, I feel has better coverage and maybe could have utilized the Z Crystal better. You may have some tricks up your sleeve with Celebi, and it'll be interesting to see what those are as the season progresses. Number 12 spot, we have Kraft, coach of the Manchest Skitty. Now, this team does look pretty good at a first glance. You have Necrozma, which is a really good Mon, Alolan Muck, which is a great Mon, Jolteon, which is really good in League. You have the, what is that thing called? Manchao, right? You have Manchao, which is super fast, Mega Garchomp, huge wall breaker, Tapu Fini, very defensive Mon, and the Z Typhlosion. The rest of the Mons, though, Durant, I don't feel does anything for the team. You have the, I'm blanking on these names, the Decidueye, which can trap a few things, but I'm not a huge fan of it in the League format. Cryogonal, which, in my opinion, is kind of a bad rapid spinner, and I feel he's going to have to run Defog on Tapu Fini too much, which kind of, Tapu Fini doesn't really want to be running Defog. It can, obviously, but it does like having other moves like Nature's Madness, a water move, and maybe a support move of some kind. And then the Licky I don't feel really adds much to the team. Now, I understand with the low tier picks, there aren't too many things that can easily be picked up, but just wanted to add that there could have been potentially a better option for that spot. So why is this team ranked so low? Well, I don't like Mega Garchomp in League format because you have to run the Mega Stone, which means you can never run, say, a Yachi Berry or a Choice Scarf or whatever type of item you'd want to run. And it's too slow. Yes, it does have very immense wall breaking capabilities with its massive physical attack, but it's too slow. It's only going to be getting those attacks off on really slow Mons. It's kind of one-dimensional. Yes, it does get a lot of coverage, but you know what a Mega Garchomp's going to do and have. And I prefer regular Garchomp over Mega Garchomp by a mile, and that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. Also, with Z Typhlosion, again, not a huge fan of it. I do recognize that it gets things like Eruption and Solar Beam for like Bloom Doom or whatever, but other than that, it doesn't have too many crazy things. I guess like a Focus Blast or something. I think a Mon with maybe more coverage moves would have been better for the Z Captain on this team. Other than that, though, I don't have too much to complain about. I think potentially another hazard removal option or one better than Cryogonal, just so Tapu Fini isn't forced into running Defog. I like the Alola Muck. I don't like the fact that there aren't many switch-ins to ground attacks. Yes, Decidueye resists, and yes, Cryogonal has the Levitate, but Cryogonal is very frail, and with the right coverage moves, a ground type can do quite a bit of damage to this team. I think that Craft will be able to run some interesting sets, but I do feel it is missing a few things. It's hard to place a finger on what those are, but I just don't foresee this team working that well against some of the other ones. I'm sure Craft will make it work though, and will climb the power rankings with time. In the number 11 spot, I have Farouk and the Pittsburgh Pangoros. So looking at this team, it is insanely offensive. This is probably the best offense on any team that was drafted. Mega Charizard X, huge setup sweeper. Alolan Marowak does crazy damage with the Thick Club. You have Battle Bond Greninja, can be Specs, can be Life Orb, can be Scarf. Z Kyurem, which has some crazy wall breaking abilities, and obviously you can run like a regular Kyurem set if that's what you want to do. The only problems with this draft though is it does lack some reliable bulk, it shares a few weaknesses, and it kind of doesn't fare too well against electric types. It has to rely on Alolan Marowak for that pretty heavily. Although, that being said, I feel it covers a lot of the weaknesses that it shares. Like, for example, there's quite a few fighting weaknesses, but then again, at the same time, you have 2 immunities to fighting. And where there may be quite a few rock weaknesses, you have 3 resists to rock. Or 4, actually, looking again. So, yes, the team does have some weaknesses, but it does patch them, which I think is a strong suit. So he has different options to cover his weaknesses each week if he chooses to, and I feel that this team's overwhelming offense will win it a lot of games. In the number 10 slot, we have the Pruben Murkrow. I don't know if I said that right, but coached by Joey. I feel that this team is kind of interesting because it has one of the best Zmons with Victini, and one of the better Megas with Mega Pinsir. That being said, that's about it for the offense. There is Latios, which can be offensive. That being said, I prefer Latios, and looking at the bulk on this team, a lot of the bulk is pretty passive. You have Registeel, Chestnut, Mantine, Aromatisse. I don't know, some of the bulk is just not cutting it for me. I think he'll be able to make it work though, and I definitely foresee this team working very well against certain other teams in the league. He does have the option to run webs with the Galvantula, which helps nicely with the Victini if it's going for V-Creates, and also it helps, like, the Latios, for example, outspeed some Scarfers that would normally outspeed it. While the team does look good, I'm not a huge fan of the lower tier picks. He does have very good hazard removal options. I don't think Piloswine really adds anything to the team. Wartortle is kind of redundant because the Mantine is there. And I feel, again, Sandslash actually isn't that bad, but like Sandslash, Piloswine, it just feels kind of redundant, and then Mantine, Wartortle also feels kind of redundant. I feel any number of those 4 Mons could be switched out to make a bit of a better team, but that's about all of the gripes I have with it. Over in the number 9 slot, we have Zach, coach of the Kentucky Torcats. I really like this team. I am a huge fan of the Firewater Grass Core. Mega Absol is pretty good in the league. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. And then you have Alakazam, which can run some interesting sets. You have the Zygarde, which has the capability of like being banded or Scarf, Life Orb, whatever. Can also set up Dragon Dances. I like the Drapion, I like the Miltank. I'm not a huge fan of Fortress, but I think it does help the team a bit, where normally it wouldn't have too many other options outside of... Actually, no, it wouldn't have any other spikers. I was looking for a second spiker, but it doesn't have any other ones outside of Fortress. So there's that. Unless Drapion gets it, but I don't really know. The only reason why I have this team kind of low is I don't think that the low tier picks really do anything to help the team. The Mons are very predictable as well, other than I would say Alakazam is probably the most versatile Mon. With the Zheatran, it's going to be expected most weeks which crystal it's running. And it does have a pretty powerful Fire, Water, Grass defensive core, although it lacks, I guess, offensive cores. I think maybe like a strong fighting type would help this team out quite a lot, as it does not have any access to fighting stab. It does get some fighting moves, but you know, it would help with the way he has his offense with Mega Absol and the Alakazam. If there was a fast fighting type in there, that would be some pretty impressive offense. Speaking more on the offense, it is quite predictable with, like, you know what Absol's running, you know what Zygarde's running. Alakazam has some ways to switch it up, but yeah, I don't know. I feel that this team might also be a bit too slow, and the speed tiers kind of jump in a big way. Like, you have some really fast Mons, and then you have a bunch of really slow Mons. So I would maybe switch out Swoobat. I think Raichu is a bit redundant, and maybe get a fighting type in there. And I think that this team will definitely do pretty well in the season, and we'll just have to see where it finds itself on the rankings next week. At number 8, we have Doric and the Kentucky Fried Combustion. This is another team that has some very good offense. We have Celesteela, Darmanitan, Mega Alakazam, and Buzzwole. And that's about it. That's how I feel about this team. I feel that this team has some pretty good Mons, but I think that the same 5 or 6 Mons are going to be coming every single week. I think it's going to be Celesteela, Darmanitan, Alakazam, Buzzwole, Roserade, Mudsdale, and then one of the lower tier picks. I absolutely hate Z-Turtonator. What does it even do? Like, it might have some form of, like, gimmick that I don't know about, but I'm not a fan of it. I think that the team is going to be really predictable, and the only reason why it's ranked so high is because the Mons that are going to be there every week are insanely good. They work well together, and that will hopefully give him some victories and see him at a better spot in future weeks. I think he has good defensive synergy, good offensive synergy, but I'm just not a fan of things like Rabombi and Alola Golem and Armaldo. I don't think they do anything for the team. I don't like Turtonator, and I feel it's going to be the same 6, maybe 7 Mons every single week. We'll see what he's thinking about his team, though, as the matches go on. And I think that he can do well with them, but I personally am not a fan of the lower tier picks. I think that there could be a bit better picks there, and a better Zmon as well. But that's just my thoughts. At number 7, we have Agron. Now, Agron is very similar to the last team we just talked about, where he has some very impressive Mons. Z-Weavile is an amazing Z-Captain. Tapu Lele is a crazy good special attacker. Mega Aerodactyl is very fast, strong physical attacker, and Empoleon, which is a good special wall. Past that, though, I think the rest of the team falls short. I'm not a fan of Salazzle. That's just a personal opinion. I don't think that Komodo will do very well. I'm sure Agron has some plans, as he is a very good battler, and I'm sure he'll make this team work. But I'm not a fan of Claydol. I don't really like Floatzel that much. It was kind of redundant with Empoleon already being there. I'm not a fan of Vikavolt. I think he could have gotten a better electric type, a more threatening one, faster one. Cradily, it does help the team, but again, not a huge fan of it. And then also the Clefairy, which isn't a bad like T6 pick. I believe it's T6. It's either 5 or 6. It's not a horrible T6 pick, but I don't think that it really does much for the team. Maybe he has some plans for it again, but I'm not gonna predict this thing to be there most weeks. There is some very, very good speed, and he does have some good defensive cores and offensive synergy. However, back onto the speed, the tiers are kind of all over the place. You have things that are insanely fast over base 100, because as it is, at a first look, it seems that Lele is the only potential Scarfer on the team, and you'd expect the rest just to be like some more standard sets. But again, Agron's a good battler, and I imagine he will pull off some interesting feats even with this team. At number 6, we have Erasmus and I'm not going to be able to say this, the Guangzhou, you get the point. The Galates. So, looking at this team, I do really like it. You have Magearna, which is amazing, Landers T, which can run the Supersonic Sky Strike. That is difficult to say. I would have preferred Magearna as the Zmon, but Zlanders still definitely does well. As far as Tornadus T goes, I'm not the biggest fan of it on this team. I think it could have been a Zmon as well over Landers, but I do believe that Erasmus was saying he was planning on changing it. So there's that. There is a bit of pseudo rain here with the Tornadus, Blastoise, Kingdra. If he sets up a rain dance, he can definitely abuse that with those mons, as well as he has the surprises with Zoroark. One thing about this team is he doesn't really have any huge walls outside of like the Pikamuku, but he does have bulky offense, so he doesn't really need big walls, and the team is pretty weak to Bolt Beam coverage. He doesn't have any resist the Bolt Beam outside of Magearna, which is nice as it can sponge those hits. However, I imagine with the Magearna you don't want to be taking too many hits if you're planning on using it offensively. I'm sure that Erasmus will be able to work around that weakness, although a specially defensive Steel type outside of Magearna would help the team a lot, in my opinion. And yeah, that's about it. In the number 5 spot, we have Cubchoo, coach of the Springfield Spoinks. Now, this draft is very interesting because Cubchoo actually says that he's not a huge fan of like things like Mew and might switch it. I personally think that Mew should stay. Mew is a very good mon, and it definitely helps out your team as it gives you so much versatility and utility. Speaking of versatility, you have some very versatile mons with the Cobalion, with the Gardevoir. They can run some interesting sets each week if you need them to, as well as like things like the Liepard can even help out. I don't see any real bad picks here, except for I guess like the Grumpig and the, what is that thing called, Driftwim, all the way down there. But you do have a very impressive Zmon with Infernape, probably the best, if not one of the best. Thunderous T is an insane wall breaker. I think it's like 145 special attack. You do have a bit of bulk with the Serena, Vaporeon, and Mew. Again, if you drop Mew, I feel you're going to be lacking bulk, so I would advise against that, but again, it's your choice. If you don't think that's going to work out for you, then do what you got to do. Now, the team is missing a Mega. I think a Mega could definitely help out. Potentially a bulky one. It could make this team very, very powerful and probably one of the best teams. But as of now, it's sitting in the number 5 spot. Up at number 4, we have the Yodeler, coach of the Chicago Cubchoos. Now, this team is pretty ridiculous. It is a sand team, so sand has its pros and cons. It sometimes can work out in draft and sometimes doesn't. So we'll see how Yodeler is able to work with it. We have obviously the Zmon of Excadrill, which is a great sand sweeper, and being able to power up some of its moves with the Z Crystal if needed can definitely help out a lot. And you do also have the backup sand sweeper of Herdier, which did get some buffs in Gen 7, so it'll be interesting to see that. I really like the defensive mons on this team. He has a lot of options. He can run like a bulky Shaman. You have like bulky Jellicent, you have Umbreon, Hippowdon, Intimidating Granbull. But the nice thing about all the defensive options is it allows him to sometimes run them offensively. So for example, he can run an offensive Shaman and he isn't really losing out on much, where if Shaman was one of his few bulkier mons, he'd have to run it defensively most weeks. He does have some good Scarf options with the Heracross and the Delphox, as well as a very powerful setup sweeper with the Haxorus. As far as hazard removal goes, I believe Hitmonchan is the only one, if I'm missing one. Oh, obviously Excadrill, right, with the Rapid Spin. So he has 2 Rapid Spin options. Again, you're probably not going to be wanting to run Rapid Spin on Excadrill that much. I had a similar issue with, I believe, Kraft's team with the Tapu Fini being forced to run Defog just because of not very good hazard removal options. So this kind of forces you to run Spin on Hitmonchan or Excadrill, and you're probably going to want it on Hitmonchan over that, but Hitmonchan isn't the greatest mon, so you might not bring it every week, so hazard removal might not be there all the time. That being said, you only have 1 Rock Week mon, so it's not the biggest deal in the world that you don't have a lot of hazard removal options. In the number 3 spot, we have Zen, coach of the South Florida Celebies. Now, this team looks threatening. You have the Mega Mawile, which is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know why this thing was allowed, but you know what? It is. I think I voted for it to stay just to see how it would go, but it's still ridiculous. Jirachi, I would have preferred that as your Zmon instead of Dusknoir, even with things like Celebrate Band. I think Jirachi would have been better. That being said, you probably have some plans with Dusknoir, but again, I think the Jirachi would have been better. The Starmie is really great, good hazard removal. You have other hazard removal options as well if you don't want to run Spin on Starmie. Arcanine, a fantastic pick. It's an Intimidator. You can run the double Intimidate with the Scrafty if you so please, and also Intimidate on Mawile before it Mega Evolves. So despite your team not having any huge walls, you have ways of wearing down physical attackers, and also you have some Assault Vest options like Electros, for example, and then you have the Dusknoir and Audino as your more bulkier mons. I'm not a huge fan of Smeargle or Sawsbuck. That being said, the rest of your draft doesn't really get hurt by not having that, so you can do pretty well in that regard. You do have a Fairy Dragon Steel Core, which is always nice. And yeah, I think that this team will do pretty well because you have a lot of ways to set up offensively, and obviously Mega Mawile is just an absolute monster. We'll see how it does as the season progresses, but for now I have you in the number 3 spot. In the number 2 spot, I have myself. Now, before you say it, oh, your ego, blah, 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 oh my god, like, honestly, I really like my team. Like, this is one of the first times I've drafted a team and looked back at it and been like, damn, that's a good team. And let me explain why. So, looking at my Fire Water Grass core, it is probably arguably the best Fire Water Grass core that was drafted. I mean, it's up there. Like, the only one that maybe rivals it is the Blue Heatran Suicune core. But the thing with my team is it's so bulky, but none of the bulky mons are passive. They all have ways of attacking or doing things or surprising the opponent with them being offensive. That being said, the team isn't perfect. I am lacking some speed in a few places. I would have liked a better Dragon than Fracture, but that's pretty much what came down to me at the end. I think Behem is going to be underrated, and a lot of teams are not going to be able to expect what it's capable of doing. Z Pangoro is able to OHKO a lot of mons, huge wall breaker. Lander's Eye, I haven't even talked about Lander's Eye yet. This thing is crazy. Like, not many things can switch into Lander's Eye, and if they can't switch, if they can switch into Lander's Eye, they're going to get worn down by the rest of my bulkier mons, and eventually just swept by Lander's Eye. Another reason why I put myself at number 2 is because I want to see you guys destroy me. I want to be at the bottom of the rankings. Please be better than me in the season so I can rank myself lower and so I can have some fun competition. But yeah, I imagine like week 1 I'll probably be at like number 10, but let me sit near the top while I can. Now, there is one team that was drafted that I like better than my own, and that's Infinite's team. Look at this. Fire, water, grass, fairy, dragon, steel, Mega Scizor, Z, Salamence, Chandelure, Mamoswine, Virizion, Sylveon. Like, this is just ridiculous. And I don't even like the low tier picks. I don't like Kamala. I don't like Alolan Raichu. I don't like Chatot. But it doesn't matter. The team, like, Mega Scizor is probably like the best Mega in Sun and Moon, at least defensively. Sylveon is crazy. It can be wish support. It can set up on its own. It can, like, just be a wall breaker. You have Chandelure, again, another potential setup mon, another wall breaker. You have Mamoswine, another wall breaker. You have Virizion, a physical or special setup mon. You have Z Salamence, a physical or special setup mon with, like, insane coverage for Z move or Z mon. Again, probably one of the best Z mons, up there with, like, Infernape and maybe another one that I'm forgetting at the moment. But yeah, this team is just ridiculous. Like, I don't see any glaring issues with the team. It's not perfect, but the speed tiering is nice. The weaknesses are covered. The offensive synergy is there. The cores are there. Multiple hazard setters. I believe there's, yeah, also multiple ways to remove hazards with, like, Scizor, Skuntank. I believe even Salamence gets defog. It's just, this team is good. It's just a good team. And I'm sure we'll see as the season progresses if it stays as one of the top teams, but it is definitely there for preseason. Alright, so wrapping things up, very ranty. I was all over the place this video. Remember, if you guys disagree with my opinions, this is before the games happen. If you feel you should be placed higher, then play well and you'll get placed higher, because that's how it's going to go from this week, or from the rest of the weeks on. Just keep in mind, this first week was the only really strongly opinionated one. The rest of them are going to be way more objective, and obviously, as I have more to judge them off of, then they'll get ranked higher or lower based on their performance, where right now I just have to rank it based off of how they were drafted. I've been talking for almost like 50 minutes now because I've cut a lot of this stuff out, I imagine, in post. So yeah, I'm going to go drink some water. I'll catch you guys next time. My name is Xilicks. Okay, thanks, bye.